Our guest speakers, yes, please be seated. Our guest speakers this morning are church members Ed Johnson, Karen Polnitz, and Shelley Glassrood. Ed, son, brother, husband, father, grandfather, swim instructor, youth camp director, mental health facility administrator, nursing and rehab facility administrator, retiree, hiker, agnostic. Karen observes that children can learn about resistance from an early age, from pushing back on cultural norms to protesting systems of oppression. She shares how her parents nurtured that spirit in her with family stories and everyday examples. Shelley, what can happen when a child's interests are supported and nurtured from an early age? Shelley tells the story of young Erin's budding passion for science and how it has shaped who she is today. So we'll start off with Ed.
According to Tom Brokaw, journalist and author, the greatest generation stayed true to their values, the values of personal responsibility, duty, honor, and faith. My mom and dad were true to this description of their generation. From their humble beginnings, I believe that they focused on one purpose: to raise a family. Una Johnson and Stella Freeman joined together to forge a family as their most sacred duty. I'm going to pause a moment. My dad's name was Una, an unusual name. It was never a problem for him until he joined the Army. The Army required him to have a middle name. So a clerk typed in Una Nunn Johnson on his registration papers. He had a few fights with guys who liked to make fun of that. Una or none. Years later, I was Una. No problem until we moved from a small farm community to a city. Tuna, Moona. After a few fights, the school got permission from my parents to use my middle name. I had one, Ed. I have never heard of any other male Unas, but there have been 4 females. Back to my parents. Una and Stella showed so much love to their children. Mom was a hugger, would laugh and praise us often. Dad, too, in his quiet way, would shed a single tear and turn away after saying, "Good job," for one of our accomplishments. We had a good life thanks to them. They grew up on farms in the Ozark Mountains of southern Missouri, true hillbillies. The time was the Great Depression, but I don't think they even noticed. As children, each of my parents worked on the farm, feeding chickens, milking cows, planting and harvesting gardens and crops, cutting and bringing in firewood, digging new holes for outhouses. Dad was child number 14 of 15. He attended school through 8th grade. I only remember him reading the headlines of the paper, the comics, and the Bible, often sounding out the words. Dad was quiet, didn't add much to conversations, almost stoic. Dad could sit at the kitchen table for hours, smoking, drinking coffee, watching the family move around him. Now, Mom was the baby of her family, number 12 of 12. According to my aunts and uncles and cousins her age, she was spoiled. Stella was social and talkative. She enjoyed school, gladly finished high school, and spent a summer at Southwest Missouri State Teachers College. That was enough to earn a certificate and to teach 30 kids, grades 1 to 8, at a one-room country school for a year until she met Una. Una came home from Germany after World War II, met Stella, and they were married. Una did not want to be a farmer. Stella did not want to live outside of town. They had both found factory work in Iowa and set about doing what that young people of the greatest generation felt it was their duty to do, raise a family. So they created me. I was the first of 4. Dad worked at Oscar Mayer, pushing wagons of meat from the butcher to the freezer to the processing floor. He didn't love his job. It was a way to make enough money for his family. Mom stayed at home like most moms, cooking, cleaning, keeping us kids out of trouble when she could. Outside of work and home, their religion is what sustained them. Both my parents were raised evangelical in the Southern Baptist Church. They rode horse-drawn wagons to church on most Sundays in their formative years. My parents had a strong faith in Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. They raised us to be evangelical Christians. The Southern Baptist Church, as I came to know it, expected us to recognize ourselves as wildly imperfect beings that needed to beg a righteous God to forgive our transgressions. Because we had been baptized, dunked in water while a preacher prayed for us, maybe Jesus Christ would intercede and save us from hellfire. And it was taught that very few of us would be able to avoid hell's fire. In fairness, there was talk of love and doing good in the sight of the Lord. So, how did this impact Ed? In high school, I began to understand how many versions of God humans had come to understand or create. I rebelled against the teachings that dictated to me I had to be perfect to get to heaven, while all around me I saw imperfect people. Only those from our religion would have life in heaven after death. God was good, but I learned about war and hate and cruelty and famine and disasters, which might have been prevented by an all-powerful God if we prayed and were virtuous. And even then, God might let the bad things happen for some unknowable reason. I began to question. Later, Reverend Brian Jessup would tell me I had become a heretic. Mom and Dad created and sustained a home through their efforts, meeting that value of personal responsibility spoken of by Mr. Brokaw. They focused on raising kids as their duty, their moral obligation. They tried to do this task with honor, through integrity and fairness, using the tools and the examples that they grew up with. And they leaned on the faith of their upbringing. However, my parents' faith led me to be an agnostic. I don't know if there's a God. Frankly, I don't care. I'm here. If there is a God, I think that she will recognize my efforts to be a good and to do good. In me, my parents were not successful in raising an evangelical Christian, but I believe I am a good person because of them. And that is what I have always tried to teach my sons, Eric and Seth, to be a good person, to do good deeds, and to focus on raising a family. Thank you.
I was raised by two rebels. My father, who crossed the distance toward freedom, and my mother, a young woman who blazed a new path for herself, and by example, for me. It was hard to understand my mom's experience as a mother until I became one myself. I wish I could have seen her then as I see her now, but so goes the cycle of generations. When I was a kid, I often experienced her limits and boundaries as suffocating, restrictive, or just plain annoying. Now, as we sit over well-earned second or third cups of coffee and compare our challenges as parents, I see my search for the right words to comfort my child or the right way to guide them to better choices as deeply intertwined with her deep and thoughtful efforts to raise me well. We are walking parallel paths in different timelines that skip and jump and reconnect, and we are learning so much from one another along this journey. I grew up with a deep appreciation for a version of my mom I knew, as my dad called it, the Berkeley hippie, who left her Midwest home and even her first college to set off on her own and discover a unique path for herself. First landing at a Native American reservation in the Southwest as a missionary, she quickly realized that the task she was charged with was not a righteous one. She learned about the deep spiritual understandings and beliefs that the people already had and looked for something else. So Berkeley it was. She began a long career in public health that enabled her to support free clinics in the Bay Area and outreach efforts in Central America. As my dad often reminds me, it was in my mama's belly, on the picket line, fighting for improved patient care conditions at the children's hospital where she worked, that I was first exposed to a culture of protesting and justice work. Marching chants like lullabies, I passed that along to my own child, carrying her through marches in my womb and in my arms, and just a few weeks ago, raising my voice in response as she called out and led chants while we marched for immigrant rights on May Day. Despite knowing the history of and being deeply connected to my mother as an activist, that is not how I came to see her growing up. Rather, I experienced her primarily as mom, the one who packed the lunches and organized the calendar and showed me how to be. All of who she was has always been underneath all of the essential work of mothering, but was so often overshadowed by this primary role of caretaker. Now, as we relate over the struggle to reclaim ourselves alongside the role of being a parent, I am so grateful that she feels safe to be honest with me, to name the doubts she felt about whether or not she was meant to be a mother, or if she was doing a good job. I'm grateful for these truths because they ring true for me as well. So we can affirm each other in the shared challenge. What a gift it is for parenting to come full circle into friendship. I see her these days recently completing the journey of seeing my youngest sibling through his high school graduation and becoming a fully empty nester. In the past few years, and especially in the past few months, she has once again stepped bravely into a place of unlearning and self-education for racial justice and equity in our country. We have complex conversations about the racist version of history she learned in school, and I witness her advocate for our extended family to come with her on that journey. I also witness her deep reflection, and I'm so grateful for her support as we both unlearn unhelpful parenting strategies and try new ways of relating to our children. So what does systemic injustice and a rebel path have to do with parenting in the new era? So much. From the many ways privilege shows up in our ability to meet our kids with patience and also in empowering them to be agents of change, to the simple ways we view them as whole people, capable of knowing themselves and making important decisions. Above all, as my mom and I have been discovering together in both spheres, our call as rebels is to recognize and shift. This is the knowing, that we have a responsibility to recognize when something doesn't feel right. We have to speak up when something is unjust. We must paint our signs, raise our fists, and take action to make it better. We must get down to eye level with our children and admit when we are wrong and make a plan to do things differently. And so goes the cycle of generations. May each generation continue to learn and grow in our knowing, continue to do better for our children and for our communities.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
30 years ago, I did something, so I'm going to cry, so just letting you guys know in advance. Okay. 30 years ago, I did something that changed my life forever. I gave birth to my child, Aaron. My husband, Don, and I were thrilled. It was the beginning of a different, deeper kind of love. Warm, protective, hopeful for the future, an unconditional love that most parents understand. I was the fourth of 6 children raised in a home with an authoritarian father who was often unkind. I did not intend to raise Aaron the same way. I loved being Aaron's mother. I was fortunate to be able to stay home with Aaron until she started school. I was grateful for that time together. We planted vegetables that we later chopped and ate. We created structures with blocks, picked up pebbles from the bottom of the pool's shallow end, discovering the fun of going underwater. We listened to music, devoured books, and found poetry about insects and animals that made us laugh. We even assembled an insect collection, a sort of motley crew of different kinds of bugs that we found floating in the pool, already dead. One of our favorite activities was to walk around our leafy neighborhood, collecting feathers, rocks, pine cones, etc. And Aaron asked questions like, why do birds hop? What kind of bird lost that feather? Sometimes I knew the answer. Activities that highlighted Aaron's interests were what Don and I sought out. Aaron loved science topics early on. She was a curious child, and we learned right along with her. She loved exploring the tide pools in Cambria and the life they contained. Like most children, dinosaurs were Erin's thing for a long time, and I discovered the dinosaur exhibit at the Los Angeles County Museum of Natural History. One area in the museum had a collection of Madagascar hissing cockroaches. We visited there several times. Ice Age mammals fascinated Erin. We became regulars at the La Brea tar pits. But we didn't find these activities all by ourselves. 26 years ago, we joined this church. At the church auction, Betty and Ken Cornelison offered a birding class at Lost Lake and lunch. The lunch was delicious. And the birding class was great, and we loved it and became birders everywhere we went. When we traveled, we brought our binoculars and looked for birds. Another auction item, I don't mean to do plugs for the auction, but here we go. Another auction item was offered by our friend, the late biology professor emeritus Dick Haas. He donated a tour of the Los Banos Wildlife Refuge, teaching us more about birds and Central Valley wildlife. And later we traveled with him to Costa Rica, observing tropical wildlife up close. Like Don and I, Erin was self-motivated and busy by choice. We provided a calm and loving home, healthy food, and support. Both Don and I were enthusiastic fans at swim meets, band, and orchestra concerts. I was her transportation. We chatted on our 20-minute drive to and from high school that kept me up to date with Erin. Biology was the class Erin loved. Dinner together every night was family time. And until middle school, Don read chapter books to Erin almost every evening at bedtime. When Erin showed interest, I found what I thought were meaningful summer volunteer activities at the Paul Varela House and Catholic Charities, requiring a step further into the real world. She saw firsthand the despair and difficulties people had just getting food and housing, and it made an impression. Without me around to nudge her, Erin found a way to serve her University of Oregon community. She volunteered on Sundays, assisting local doctors in a Eugene Street clinic, where she learned about the health disparities there, and the same for the rest of the nation. That motivated her to seek a path in medicine. Her major became human physiology. Then, as a surprise, at age 22, Erin came out to us as trans. We were accepting and supportive, but we worried. Would she face discrimination or be turned away from a graduate program or medical school? We had many questions and fears, and we lost a lot of sleep. Good news. Erin was accepted too and went and completed medical school and is finishing her second of 3 years as a family medicine resident, helping people every day. My role as a parent has changed again. Erin works long hours, so I visit when it's convenient for her, and we do what we love. We take walks, we go to indie films, try new restaurants, cook together, and talk. She tells me of her challenges and the positives in her life. She still loves music, nature, and birds, and sends me wildlife photos from her hikes or her paddleboarding adventures. We still speak every Sunday, often reminiscing about Don. We miss him. Sorry. Today is Erin's 30th birthday. She's a smart, articulate, self-confident, and kind person. She intends to live her authentic life, doing the work she loves. And I am grateful to be her mother. And I'm grateful for this community. Thank you.